Welcome back. Today I'm going to show you 10 of the worst mistakes in Python and how to fix them so that you can write great code. So let's get started. When this Python file runs, this outputs the number of miles that a person has run this year. And when I run this program, it doesn't give any errors. So it works, right? I'm totally finished with this program since there's no errors. Ignorance is bliss, right? Well, this leads us to our first mistake. In the main function here, I try something, then I have accept pass. Try accept pass? What is this? It tries this code, and if there's an error, do nothing. Don't tell me where the error is, just do nothing, then there's no error, right? This solves the problem. No, it doesn't. So let's remove this try except pass. Sometimes you want to have certain exceptions, but then you wouldn't want to have pass here. You want to say this failed because of something. But for this program, we don't need try and except. So let's just fix that and run the program again. I ran this, and now it says there's an error on line 8. Well, if we look at this print statement, it says that's an average of, and then average miles per day. But it can't convert the float to a string. So you need to put str, and then this will solve this error when I run it again. Now it works and says, hello Jonathan, you have run 865.2 miles this year. Then it gives us this long average. This leads us to our second mistake, which is having an unnecessary amount of data precision. We don't need 4.7278688 blah 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 average miles. So I'm just gonna round average and then round it to 2 decimal places. And then I'll run it again. And here it says you have run an average of 4.73 miles per day. We don't need everything after that, so that solves this issue. Our third issue is Un-Pythonic Looping. So after I print that's an average of 4.73 miles per day, you have list of activities and it prints running, walking, and biking. So we have this while loop. And you might be like, oh, this works, right? True, but we have this variable I and we have indexing. This can be a lot simpler and we can reduce the complexity. The first thing I'll do is make this a for loop. And I'll say for I in range and then the length of activities. This reduces the number of lines of code from 4 to 2 and still outputs running, walking, and biking. And this is a lot simpler, however you still have range, length, and the number of indices, so this still isn't Pythonic looping. What you can do to make this a lot easier is say for activity in activities, and then you'll just print out the specific activity and then you eliminate indices. And for each activity in activities, print the activity and it prints running, walking, and biking. Our fourth error is removing unnecessary code. So we see here it says, hello Jonathan, you have run 865.2 miles this year. Then we just have this 4.73. But do we really want to print just the average? We don't need that. That is unnecessary code that we shouldn't have. Also, at the top we see from datetime import datetime and date. But we don't use date at all. So we can delete that as well. And finally, we have average equals this works, name and current miles. Yet we don't use average, so we don't need to assign this variable. And when I run it again, it doesn't output that extra line of code of the average. but it still works, which is great. The next error we have is CamelCase. So we see here day of year. This gets the day of the year from the datetime module, but every word is capitalized. And you're like, oh, Python accepts both CamelCase and SnakeCase, so this is right? Well, according to PEP 8 standards, which are the standards for Python, you want to have everything be an underscore. So I'll just have day underscore of underscore year equals datetime dot now. Then I'll do the same thing here. And this is now in SnakeCase. That means there is an underscore in between every single word. And I'll run this just to check, and there are no errors. Our sixth bad practice here is using a global variable when you don't need to. Global variables are not good because they can be modified in any function. So you want to put them in a specific place, otherwise you may have a variable being modified when you don't know it. We see this here with current miles, a global variable 865.2. I'll then put it in here, and since it's not a global variable anymore, it shouldn't be in all caps. So I'll say current miles equals 865.2, and then pass it into the function. This works. This leads us into not using a good naming convention. We have a function called this works. Let's update this to something it actually does. I'll change this to average miles run per day. And that's a lot more descriptive than this works. And we see there's two parameters here called A and B. Well, what are A and B? We see it says, hello, A, you have run string B miles this year. And you're like, oh, variable A is name, so let's replace A with name to be more descriptive, and B with miles. An average, what's this an average of? It's an average of the miles that a person has run. So I'll just call this average miles run, and now you know what it is an average of. Our next issue is with print formatting. We see here I forgot a space after 473 in miles and after the name. But this still isn't great, and it can be a lot cleaner if you do print format. We can now make this one string, and we don't have to worry about types. We'll just put the variables in curly braces. And now this is one string, and there's no pluses in between everything, and it's so much easier to read. And I'll run it again, and this works with the proper spacing. And when you just read the line, hello, name, you have run how many miles this year? And that's a lot easier to look at as well. Our ninth issue is variable types. Well, you may say, Python, you can have any variable type, it doesn't matter. Well, it's good to specify it. For example, name, it says it can be any parameter, but we want name to be a string, and we want miles to be a float. This is good because it tells the user what to enter, and this function also returns the average miles run, so I'll return a float. And our final error is docstrings. We want specific documentation for every function for other people to know what it does. And I'll say that this function calculates the number of miles someone has run per day this year. And this function has two parameters. So let's list them here. And I also put what it returns because it returns average miles run is a float. and that's the average miles that the person ran this year. So it has a sentence for what the function does, parameters, we have 2 in this case, a type and a definition of what they are, and what it returns. And if you're looking at this code for the first time, average miles run per day, and it says right away this function calculates the number of miles that someone has run per day this year, you understand what it does, and you don't have to look through the code in order to figure out what to do. And looking at this code, it's a lot cleaner, and you don't have the complexity of a while loop at the bottom. It's just for activity and activities, productivity. This code is much cleaner than before and has solved 10 of the most common issues in Python coding. So now you know how to write great programs. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to follow along with this video series by subscribing and hitting the notification bell so that you can expand your knowledge about Python. And as always, I can't wait to see you next time.